It's been called the Battle of the Blue Bloods, a fight to the finish over the fortune of millionaire socialite Brooke Astor and the son some tabloids call Crook Astor. Just yesterday, a jury agreed, but this family saga goes back nearly a century. Here's Deborah Roberts.
Remember Titanic?
That's John Jacob Astor, the richest man on the ship.
Hey, Astor!
A famous name on an even more famous ship.
Iceberg, right ahead!
Captured so well in the blockbuster movie. Multimillionaire John Jacob Astor helped his pregnant wife into a lifeboat, then lost his own life in the icy water, leaving his eldest son, Vincent, the vast family fortune. Flash forward to New York City nearly a century later. Another Astor, famously selfless in a different way, Brooke, John Jacob's daughter-in-law, who inherited that fortune, spends her life giving much of it to charity.
I've been on the board of the zoo forever.
She became New York City's godmother, showering millions of dollars on its people and landmarks, like the Metropolitan Museum of Art and Public Library.
When you go older, you've got to get nicer. A nasty old person is the end. Don't you agree? You with the...
Yes. Brooke Astor was also the grande dame in the New York social scene, going to parties nearly every night.
She loved to dance. Mrs. Astor would dance at any opportunity.
She liked men. She was attractive. She was also rich, which is also a very attractive attribute.
One of the world's great flirts. She really had some kind of magical quality that drew people to her.
Friends included the Reagans, Kissingers, De Laurentiis, and ABC News anchor Barbara Walters.
If Brooke Astor came to your house for dinner, that was a very big compliment. If she invited you to her house, I think that was even more of a compliment. And she loved collecting people. She loved people from all different fields, which is, I guess, how we became friendly.
For all her famous friends and the surprising kindness she could show to strangers, like this homeless woman.
Look, I brought you a coat. You want me a coat? Yes.
Oh, nice.
Brooke Astor was oddly distant from her own son, Tony Marshall. Merrill Gordon wrote the biography Mrs. Astor Regrets.
It was a very complicated relationship. He worked for her, she gave him a salary, and he was making at one point about $500,000 a year. At the same time, she would make derogatory remarks to her friends about how Tony was not independent.
A tense mother-son relationship, poisoned some say by money, would ultimately drag the Astor name from the glitter of high society into the mud of scandal.
You rarely see a famous family like this falling apart in public. I kept thinking, whatever happened here, it started a long time ago.
Tony, Brooke Astor's only child, was born during her first marriage to Dryden Cuser, a wealthy bully she called a perfectly terrible man.
She implied that Tony was the product of a marital rape, that Dryden Cuser had beaten her up and broken her jaw when she was pregnant with Tony. You really get the sense that that was one of the reasons she never really bonded with Tony.
Tony would take the name of his mother's second husband, Buddy Marshall. After Buddy died, Brooke married the millionaire Vincent Astor, by all accounts a demanding and difficult man, who apparently was tough on Tony. New York Society writer David Patrick Columbia tells a story.
When Vincent Astor came into the room on a Sunday morning and saw Tony sitting in his suit and his tie talking to his mother, who was having breakfast in bed, and Vincent Astor said, "Get that man out of this house right now. I never want to see him again. And if he does come back here and I do see him again, you're going to leave too." And from there, he left, and Tony did not speak to his mother until Vincent Astor died.
Why didn't Vincent like Tony, do you think?
I think Vincent Astor felt very threatened by anyone being close to Brooke, that he really wanted her only for himself.
So Brooke somewhat abandoned her son just to please her husband?
She did, and she felt quite guilty about it, as she wrote in her books.
And although he would excel in many ways, a decorated war veteran, an ambassador, author, producer of Broadway plays, who for years also managed his mother's personal fortune, Tony was never really a part of Brooke Astor's social circle.
He wasn't what? sparkly enough, maybe exciting enough, interesting enough. Perhaps he bored her a little bit. I think that Tony spent his life maybe trying to have his mother love him.
Looking for love. Tony Marshall says he finally found it here in Northeast Harbor, Maine, where Brooke Astor had a cherished summer estate, Cove Inn. Tony often escorted his mother to this church, joined by others of the so-called mink coat congregation. It's where Tony met Charlene Gilbert, who was not only married, she was the minister's wife. Their romance was the talk of the town, says Nan Lincoln, a reporter with the Bar Harbor Times.
I think people went into different camps. Those of who thought it was a scandal because a marriage broke up, because she was a gold digger, and that there were other people who, like me, thought of it more like a Cinderella story.
I met Tony and fell in love with him, and I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world.
So it's a love story between you two, huh?
Absolutely right. It is a love story.
Charlene and Tony allowed 2020 exclusive access to their Upper East Side home recently, not to talk about the case, but to reveal a little of who they are.
How old would you guess you are here, Tony?
5, I think.
When they met, they say, they were both in bad marriages. Being accepted as a couple wasn't easy.
When Tony first told his mother that he was getting divorced, she was thrilled. And she said, "Oh, this is wonderful. You can escort me to all the dinners and parties." Well, not long after that, he told her that he was getting divorced because he wanted to marry me. Then she wasn't so thrilled.
That didn't go over very well.
She was not thrilled. But over time, she realized that Tony and I truly were deeply in love.
Yet others insist Brooke Astor never got over what she considered a scandalous romance.
Brooke didn't like Charlene. Brooke wasn't crazy about the wife before Charlene, so, I mean, it may be that she wouldn't have approved of any wife. But Charlene had left the minister, and Brooke just didn't like that.
I mean, is nothing sacred.
Philip Marshall, Tony's son from his first marriage, was suspicious of his stepmother from the start.
You know, you have to wonder, was there some grand plan? Or was it simply love at first sight? And I think it might be a mix.
Are you trying nicely not to say that you suspected she was a gold digger?
I think gold digger, or maybe emerald digger, as the circumstances have it, or something. I'm not sure. I think Charlene came from a family that had very little money, and she saw an opportunity. Yeah.
But would Tony and Charlene inherit Brooke Astor's entire fortune? Not necessarily. Listen to what she had to say back in 1992.
When you die, the foundation is done?
Obviously, I won't exist. Goes with me. You think that's selfish? It's all going to be given away. I mean, it's not going to be... You see, my son isn't I mean, he's not an Astor.
Not an Astor, a distinction she would repeat over the years, and which would echo into this courtroom, where this summer a sensational trial would unfold.
The evidence in this case was indeed disturbing.
Tony Marshall accused of stealing millions from his own mother.
In order to line his own pockets and the pockets of his wife.
And who first brought the family scandal to light?
You know, there are people who probably would say, well, how did I do this to my father? Quite frankly, what I did was help my grandmother, and he put this upon himself.